Welcome to BigFish News and Media, news made simple. I'm sure we've all heard our parents or some adult talk about what's going on between Russia and Ukraine. Maybe we've even seen it on the news ourselves for a brief moment. You might just wonder, what is brewing between these two countries? I mean, we know there is definitely tension, but what is NATO? Why does Putin want to invade Ukraine? What is to be expected? There are close to infinite elements that have prompted such questions. However, today we'll be discussing some of the most common ones. Hit that big red subscribe button below and join us on our journey in helping teens understand the world. Here's a list of member states of NATO. NATO stands for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, and it is an institution that is aimed as a governmental and military alliance. Putin is adamant on his resenting of NATO, so let's take a look at why the Russian president is determined to invade Ukraine. First of all, just to clarify, Putin is the current president of Russia and has been since 2012. Though Moscow has denied planning for an attack, it has been insisted that NATO's support for Ukraine increases the threat to Russia. How exactly did this division start? Well, according to our sources, Ukraine is seen as a part of Russia politically, culturally, and linguistically. However, the west of the country supports a larger association with Europe. Keeping this in mind, Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union until 1991, when there was an abundant vote for independence. So when NATO extended an offer for Ukraine in 2004 to become a member someday, tensions arose. Based on information gathered February 19th, there are currently over 150,000 Russian troops surrounding Ukraine, though on February 15th, Putin announced he would be reducing this number, demonstrating his openness to a diplomatic course of action. To further expand, Russia surrounds Ukraine on three sides. This is where NATO comes in. Ukraine joined the Enhanced Opportunity Partner Interoperability Program on June 12, 2020, meaning that NATO members contribute to NATO-run action. A key word here is interoperable, essentially meaning the ability to communally work with NATO forces following NATO rules, procedures, and standards. So what is the goal? Provided our research, Putin does not want Ukraine to be a part of NATO, fortified by the use of economic pressure, propaganda, and cyber attacks as a means of increasing stress. On the other hand, it has been mentioned that regardless of international warnings, Ukrainian citizens are used to these threats, going about their day-to-day lives. Now that you have a brief introduction, let's get into some specifics. The Soviet Union was a national republic located in Eastern Europe and is central to Northern Asia. It was formulated in 1917 as a result of the revolution which dethroned the Russian monarchy and introduced the USSR, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. There were various factors that contributed to the collapse of the Soviet Union on December 25, 1991. So let's take a look at a couple, including the disastrous political tactics and the Chernobyl explosion. On March 11, 1985, Mikhail Gorbachev was titled the General Secretary of the CPSU. His main national objectives were to stimulate the failing Soviet economy and construct an improved government. Due to initial failed attempts of pursuing his goals, Gorbachev introduced policies of openness and restructuring. Due to these inadequate approaches put in place by Gorbachev, the Soviet Union began to tumble towards defeat. In April 1984, the Unit 4 reactor at the Chernobyl power station located in Pripyat, Ukraine, exploded. One source tells us that the Soviet Union moderated the explosion to seem less disastrous than it actually was. The casualties of the explosion were profuse, and the propaganda provided by the Communist Party was complete to cite, compared to the real situations of those placed in contamination zones due to radiation poisoning. Ultimately, the trust of the Soviet Union was ruptured and was inherently a contributing factor to the fall of the Soviet Union. Ukraine gained its independence during the fall of the Soviet Union that was authorized with a public vote. In the report of our sources, if a war were to occur, it is expected that 50,000 civilians could be killed, while up to 5 million could become refugees. As a result, Europe will have a refugee and humanitarian crisis. Public opinions might change, and civilians could fight alongside in support. Larger scale, and instability in the global economic and stock market could flourish. Energy prices will increase, as well as African and Asian countries that depend on Ukraine will be affected. In terms of the battle itself, Russia is expected to use ground troops in Belarus, supported by airstrikes, heading south to take control of the capital of Ukraine, Kyiv, since Ukraine's army would involuntarily surrender. Oh my goodness, the tension. Russia and Ukraine have had a rough past that brings us to an even ruddier present. It's clear that there are so many contributing factors to this ongoing dispute, and unfortunately, it doesn't look like a resolution is impending anytime soon. Hopefully you have a better understanding of what has been dominating our news channels. Any video recommendations, comment, or message us on our other platforms. See you soon. Big fish, big brain.